How are you today, Katie?
I am doing very well, thank you very much. It is not too bad a day up here in not sunny Peterborough. How about you?
Uh, Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I got to the techs into a worked in our little test so that my stress levels reduce. So you on it, he's just him. He's like, yeah, everyone knows that behind the scenes there's always a last minute little bit of craziness going on, but I think we're there. So we said we wouldn't wait too long, but I will just wait 20 more seconds and then we'll kick off. And I'll start to share my screen.
It's like that last minute rush, isn't it, for the tube when you like stand back from the closing doors. It's like, quickly, everybody get in.
I always feel envious of people on the tube in London that are on holiday. Like, you see like families and you think like, I'd like to come here one day as a tourist. Right. Just in case people think this is a travel show, I'm going to start.
I mean, it could be. We'll take things off of the
Yeah.
favourite tube station, everybody.
Well, please, in the chat, please put your favourite tube station in the chat. I'm going to go with Southgate, which most people won't know, but it's up north and it's like a really space age design from the 20s. So please put your favourite
It's
tube
is
station.
Southgate on the Piccadilly line.
Yeah, it's right up the top. It's right.
Yeah, I like see Cockfosters is where I park in town.
There you go. You're allowed to post tube stations that are not on the Piccadilly line as.
Other lines are available.
Yeah. Cool. Let me share my screen. Totally, I'm just laughing now. I've totally lost traffic. So
It's already, and we're only 3 minutes in.
no one else is voting apart from me. No one's liking our train station chat. Cool. Okay, here we go. You're sharing your screen. Let me go into it. Let me move to slideshow. And we will kick off. So, welcome everyone. Today, it's probably my favorite title of any webinar that we've ever hosted at the Happiness Index, which is using emotions as data points to be more effective leaders. Today, I am here as your host. I'll introduce the Happiness Index in a second, but more fun and more interesting than that, I'm here with Katie Allen, who did an amazing job at our conference recently, and we thought we've got to team up more. So, Katie, please introduce yourself and please tell us about what you do as well. Like, feel free to have a shameless plug in there as well.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'll definitely take that opportunity to say good morning, everybody. My name is Katie Allen. I use the pronouns she and her, and I am an inclusion consultant and confidence coach. And essentially what that means is that I work with small to medium-sized businesses, and I help your leadership teams get over the fear of saying the wrong thing in a society nowadays where we're not entirely sure what we can and can't say. And the reason we're talking about emotions as data today is because through my work, a lot of that is we've realized that connecting with ourselves and the way that we feel about things is one of the greatest barriers to stopping us from having the conversations we think we should be having, and then maybe don't get to. And I also am the host of the Speaking of Inclusion podcast as well. So that's another space where we just have all of those taboo, off limits, not talked about topics. We bring them into the surface and I interview all sorts of really interesting people. And we try and get over the fear of putting our foot in it.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to, that point on confidence, I'm going to come back to a point on that later to do with previously Radio 1 DJ Fern Cotton. But she now actually talks about happiness a lot. And she said something at a conference that you just said that resonated, which we'll come back to.
Excellent.
So a little bit about the Happiness Index. In June, we'll be launching the largest ever and deepest report into world workplace happiness. Just a little bit, most people know us for the index, so they'll know us because we're sharing data. But most of our money comes from our platform. So that's our customers that are paying for a platform that does their employee engagement surveys, the employee experience, well-being, D&I, all the surveys that you would need, exit surveys and so on. And we also have services. So one of the biggest challenges that our clients face is they've got loads of data, but what do you do about it? So we've got an Action AI service. We also have Thrive and Perform. So Thrive is training on all those blockers behind engagement and happiness. And Perform is how do you create a thriving culture and turn that into performance. So that's just for the people that don't know about the Happiness Index. This is what we're going to cover today. How paying attention to our emotions, thoughts, and reactions can shape how we show up for ourselves and others. the effect hormones can have, how to create psychological safety and how to impact the people around us, how to identify confirmation bias and how we use that data to rethink how we lead and connect, and how emotions impact productivity. So there's going to be some poll questions which we'll come back to. David's in the background and he's organizing them. But I'm going to get rid of the slides and I'm going to bring Katie back. And Katie, using data points as emotion is both something that we speak about, but I'd love to know. I think I talk about it more from a happiness index geeky perspective, and I think you talk about it from a more holistic perspective, but I think we meet somewhere. So I'd like to just get your view on what you mean about emotions as data points.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is as I started to allude to in my intro, when I work with kind of all sorts of leadership teams and just teams in general and even individuals, when we get to these kind of points of having these difficult conversations, it generally has to be some sort of feeling that is coming up from within us that is stopping us from having the conversations that we want to be having. And as humans, right, we have got this kind of thing in our DNA that stops us. It's a protection mechanism, right? We all know about fight, flight, freeze and fawn. And we have these mechanisms built into us that stop us from getting ourselves into these tricky territory. So when we want to have, a difficult conversation, do awkward feedback, or maybe challenge someone on something, these emotions come up within us because they're like, hang on a minute. Are we about to get ourselves into a situation that is unsafe? And we start to develop fear, or we start to develop kind of, anxiety or shame, or worrying about this judgment that might happen from other people. And then we just run a mile from it, don't we? Or we just decide, I'm not going to get involved in that. Whereas actually what we should be doing is, exactly as we're saying, use that emotion as a data point, because everything that happens in our body, whether it's kind of emotionally or physiologically, it's all information that tells us something. So when we have those feelings in our stomach of nerves of like, oh God, I've got to have this conversation with this person and I don't know how it's going to go. And you start to feel a bit nauseous, don't you? And you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. No matter how much you prepared for it, you still go into that conversation and then your heart's racing and the words all fall out of your mouth at 1,000 miles an hour because you just want to say the thing to get it over with. Like, this is all information. It's all data. And I think it's something that we often overlook about, well, why is it that we're feeling that way? Is it about how prepared we feel for that conversation? Is it about the relationship that we have with that person? Because sometimes if we know someone really well, it can be quite simple to maybe say, can we have a chat about something that just happened? Whereas if we don't know someone very well, it can be really daunting. Like, how am I going to position this? How might they respond to it? So all of this to me, it's all data. Like you said, let's get geeky about it. Let's not see it as something to be fearful of. Let's think, okay, what does this tell me? And how might I shape my behavior as a result of this information that I'm picking up? Oh, you're on mute, Matt.
It's like it's
I
20.
know you said the most insightful thing that any of us are going to hear today. So
That's it. Shut down the webinar. I've said it now. There's a couple of bits I just wanted to drill into on that point. One is creating a culture of that, but firstly, can you just bring it to life, Katie? I bet you've had an example in the last 6 weeks where you've done that yourself. Have you got an example where you've listened to your own emotions?
yeah, so work and personal life, right? Because we are humans all of the time. So in fact, even at your happiness index conference just a few weeks ago, so I think I even started my session by saying, I am a woman of a certain age. I am experiencing menopausal symptoms. And I know within me that means that my mind goes blank, I lose words, I get really hot. And those are things that fill me with anxiety and worrying about the judgment of other people of like, I'm supposed to be a professional and here I am showing up just like sweating profusely and saying, I'm sure I've got something interesting to say and I don't know what it is right now. And I know that people will relate to that, anyone who's going through this. So it's like, how do I use that information? It's like, well, if I think that's going to happen to me, I decided I'm just going to call it out at the beginning and just say, this is something I'm experiencing. I'm going to be honest and open about it and just own it rather than trying to pretend that there's something unprofessional or something shameful about, like, this is what my body is doing to me right now. I can't help it. So just step in and own it. And then from a personal perspective as well, right? You have to have difficult conversations all the time. So with your partner, your kids, your parents, like there are conversations that need to be had. And every time I go into, what I would be deeming as being a tricky conversation, and I've done several of these this week in my own life with my partner, I kind of have to think like, how is what I'm going to say going to be felt and understood by them? Um, and how do I feel coming into this? And if I position like, I really want to say something, I'm nervous about how you might respond to this. And it's making me feel a bit anxious. And I might not say it in the way that ideally I've rehearsed it in my head.
Yeah.
So it might just come, but can you just like bear with me while I say the things I need to say, and then can we talk about it? And just again owning the fact that like I might cock this up as I'm trying to tell you something, but I'd like to say it anyway.
Yeah. I think that brings me on to the second part, actually, Katie, around you, building a culture of having these conversations at work and making it normal. Because feedback's a good example. Like, you've used a couple of examples of when you've got to deliver feedback, and have in a company where we do try and practice what we preach, you kind of get used to it, don't you? And like, but still, I've still not got to the point where I think when someone says, "Oh, can I have a word and give you some feedback?" My brain is still thinking, "Oh my God, it just goes into the worst. What are they going to say? This is going to be terrible." But then I'm speaking to myself saying, "No, this person has now got the confidence to speak to me and give me some feedback. I need to listen. This is really important, right?" But like, we're a feedback company, and we still find it difficult. How do you build a culture of people discussing their emotions at work and just make it normal?
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's a big thing. As everything you're describing there, these aren't kind of creating that kind of culture isn't something that you can just develop overnight, or you can write a list of here is how we're going to behave to one another from now on. Do these things and it will all be well. Like, it just doesn't work that way. It takes time and effort and constant small adjustments. But what I would say, it's really when you are committed to creating that kind of a culture, it's about really thinking about, well, why are we doing this, what are the benefits that we're going to see, and then owning that commitment very openly to say, this is something we're going to try now. And I'd refer to the work by Amy Edmondson about psychological safety. I mean, for me, this is one of the foundations. If you're trying to create this open and honest feedback culture, you need to create that your environment, ensure your environment is psychologically safe. And by that, what we mean is that, people can firstly feel welcome into the space in the first place. So everybody has to feel like they belong and like they should be there. They have to be able to participate and ask questions. So you've got to feel safe to say, oh, can you tell me more about that? Or maybe I don't understand, or, oh, that's interesting. Like, but I've got a take on this. And then they want to be able to contribute as well. So, oh, I had a thought about that as well. And in a previous company, we used to do this thing and share information back into the group. And then finally be able to challenge it when you hear each other saying things and you're like, oh, I don't experience that, or that, oh, actually, no, you're speaking about that as if that's something that happens all the time. Like, we've got this great culture of feedback. Actually, I'm new to the business and I don't think that that is what you've got here. And here's my experience. People need to feel safe to be able to give all of that. And again, it comes from that being able to be vulnerable within ourselves. Again, going back to the emotions, like, what are the emotions that we experience when we think about participating in that environment? Do I feel like I can be vulnerable and
Yeah.
be myself and participate in these conversations? And that's something definitely that takes time and consistent reinforcement and iterations as well. Like, you have to be experimental with it.
Yeah, I'm smiling as you said it because you used a personal example, and this week the feedback that I've had from my children is that I'm boring and I'm ruining Christmas. So I'm owning the boring one. I'm happy to own that. I am boring, but ruining Christmas, I'm not taking responsibility as the bearer of
Well,
ruin Christmas for the world. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that it's interesting, isn't it? Like, that dynamic and interplay of power as well, because and people don't lie quite rightly about describing a culture as a family, but I'm not. My children have said that. I know it's like slightly tongue in cheek, but I'm not. I can't fire them. I can't fire them as my children. And but at work, there is a power dynamic in play, isn't it? No matter how much everyone says they're chilled out, open door, like, you can come and speak to me, you're still paying someone's wage, which is probably paying their mortgage or their rent. So how do you reconcile that, Katie? Like, with power dynamics and things, how, because that's complicated, isn't it?
Absolutely. And again, this is something that will be very specific, dependent on the context of an organization, because all organizations are different, aren't they? We all, we have different objectives, we sell different products and services, and we have different people within our spaces. So I think there's that element of work to be done before you decide to embark upon any great cultural change, is to really be clear about, well, what type of organization are we? So what's our as is state? And then where's our to be? Like, where do we want to be? And what is that gap in between? And in bridging that gap, what is the culture that we need to be creating? And rather than saying, well, okay, we want to be this place where everybody gives really candid feedback and we can all speak freely, and you just immediately think you can jump to that. You have to say, well, what are the steps and increments that you can take in between that help people feel safe and reassured? Because everybody's going to be going on that journey, regardless of your power, your position or power.
Yeah.
Everybody has to adjust to that, and you have to be able to then readily share feedback on that. But to your point, I mean, everybody needs to understand, and I am one of those people that gets really twitchy when we talk about organizations being family, particularly because like my dad's not going to fire me as much as he may want to. I'm not getting kicked out.
Yeah.
Some people, if you have people in your organizations who are on visas, so it's maybe not even just that their mortgage, it's that their entire livelihood and existence within a country for a life they've built themselves could hinge on their employability within your business. That's massive. So yeah, you have to create a space where people can feel like they can show up to the limit that they feel comfortable doing that, and that is up to them. That's not up to you. Totally. And all you can do is continue to send signals out. And this is also when we think about people from other marginalized communities as well. Like, we hear this all the time. We've got an open door policy. Just come and tell us anything. And actually, if you've just decided that, people are going to test that to see if you really mean it or if it's safe. And it's going to start with very small asks. And I noticed this when I worked in HR. People would come and ask like really, really small things. And you think, this is strange. And you'd be like, yeah, of course, do that. Or we'd work on something. And then you'd realize there was about 3 little increments. And then the big thing came and you were like, oh, this is the thing that you wanted to talk about. Now that all makes sense. But we start, don't we, by dripping in like, oh, I just wanted to talk about, we've got flexible work policy on the thing. I've just got some questions. Can I just find out? Then that kind of starts. And then you get a bit further down the line and it's like, oh, actually, I've been having some problems with my manager because I want to do this. And they've said, and you're like, that's where that was leading to.
Yeah. That's where you get into sort of difficult conversations where people don't know, because they may have worked somewhere where that was a bad thing, even though that's not here. And we all come with our own bait. I remember we hired someone who was pregnant while she was going through the interview process. Not a problem, no issues with that. However, for her own choice and for lots of different reasons, she didn't disclose that to us. Not that we asked. Mm-hmm. And it's not any of our business. But I remember having a chat with her. Her worry was that then we would say we would find a way of not hiring her because she's pregnant. But if you've experienced that, and lots of people have, that's going to be in your mind, isn't it? But there's little questions that lead up to trying to find out about how are you going to treat me when I'm here.
Absolutely.
So, Casey, I just want to touch on hormones a little bit. And bring it out to talk about macro data a little bit more on the hormones. So, if you think, one of the things we talked about at the conference is one of the challenges of being at the Happiness Index, or anyone who's listening who's collecting data on how their employees feel, so their engagement surveys, well-being surveys, is that when you see data that confirms what you already think, hormones are sent out in your brain, as you were talking about, that in your body that make you feel good. But the reverse also happens. If you see data that disputes or disagrees with what you already believe, it sends out hormones in your body, in your brain, that don't make you feel great. And going back to the fight or flight piece. Yeah. Now, this is a real challenge for businesses because this data is what they need to hear, but the senior people in those roles might not want to hear about it. And sometimes it is about the senior team. I've sat in board meetings where the issue is, for example, they don't find the vision that the senior leadership team have put out there as inspirational. And that you can take that as personal, can't you? You can really take it so that you could have 80% of the organization saying they're not really getting excited about the vision, but you may be the person that was like central. So no matter, again, going back to that, no matter how chilled out we think we are, still gonna like hurt deep. It just does, because that's your work and you feel ownership to it. And credit to those people that it doesn't hurt. I'm impressed. But how do we deal with that when it is uncomfortable data? Because this is the whole intersection here of different subjects, isn't there? So if an organization, if you're in a senior HR position and you're getting data back that you don't agree with, where do we start with that, Katie?
Yeah, I think the key point here is to, again, to reiterate, it's data. Everything is data, and it is up to you what you choose to do with that. If you thought you were going to send a survey out and only get back everything's excellent, then you shouldn't have sent that survey out, because what would have been the point if someone was just going to always confirm the thing that you thought? You can just sail through life thinking that anyway and save your money. It's all good. So actually, you did this because you wanted to know what people thought. And now, if people are trusting you to tell you what they think,
Yeah.
that's a fantastic signal. So even if it doesn't give you the message you want, it's really great that people are giving you the truth. So firstly, big tick, right?
Yeah.
And then I would say, take a minute, let it land, and be like, we thought this new mission was amazing. We thought everyone was going to get really behind it. Why is there this pocket of people that think it's rubbish? Like,
Yep.
how did that not land? Get curious. Think about that. Okay, what are the follow-up questions you want to ask? Or can you delve into the data even deeper? Can it be disaggregated? Like, is it specifically within a team that all of these people sit? And actually, is it indicative of something that maybe isn't necessarily about the mission statement? Is it about something that's particularly happening within that team, or with the manager, or with a certain person? Like, what's going on? Or if it's more broadly and it's across the whole organization, is it in the positioning of the message you've tried to give? So how can you follow that rabbit hole and get curious about, well, what is it that people are trying to tell us with this, if it isn't clear in the actual words they're using to tell you? Because again, usually find in feedback surveys, some people are really great and they will give you like a stream of consciousness of everything they think about you. And whilst that can be a bit of a pain sometimes to have to read and think, oh, here we go, Steve from accounts again, doing the thing that Steve from accounts does, right? But actually, Steve from accounts is giving you the time of day to tell you how he feels about things. So dig in. And likewise, what are the correlations in if other people are saying similar things? Like, where are the themes?
Yeah.
What's it? It's data. Use the data, and feel hurt, feel a little bit by it, but again, tune into your own emotions. Well, that's because you care. Because if you didn't feel a little bit grumpy that someone has just rained on your parade, well, you probably wasn't the right mission, was it?
Yeah. It's really, when you were talking, I was thinking about how I imagine it, Katie, which is, I imagine all of your team, all of your employees, and they're on a landscape, and they're all in different valleys and different hills, by different rivers, by different trees, and you've asked everyone what they can see. And probably as the most senior person, potentially you've got a wider view of all the things that are going on in your, and you've got your view out across this lovely landscape. But you might have an employee that is stuck in a valley somewhere and they're seeing it very differently. And that's what I go through in my own head, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm thinking, well, this is just a different perspective. So I'm going from having one perspective to multiple perspectives. But again, I think it's around talking through that. Katie, we're going to go to one of the polls.
Yes.
We've got a couple of polls in here. We want to get everyone involved because we've got some. I'm looking through the attendee list. So up goes the poll. How often do you take a moment to reflect on your emotions before responding to a situation? It's funny seeing a question like that, because that can depend on so many different things for me. Like, have I had good sleep? Have I eaten? How long ago was my last holiday?
Yeah.
I definitely, the better my well-being and general health is, the better I'm doing this question. So I think this would be my answer to this would change. Actually, any thoughts from you, Katie?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say, do we need another button that says it depends? Because I'm with you, and actually, to build on what you're saying there, for me, there's this distinction, isn't there, between our mood and our emotions. And actually, our mood is the thing that's going on within us. And then our emotions are the things that are kind of there's a stimulus from an external source that is creating something within us. So I know that if I'm feeling pretty good, I've had a good morning, so I've had a really good night's sleep, I've been to the gym, and then I'm coming into a situation, I might be a little bit more prepared and resilient to kind of stop and reflect and think, okay, I'm coming into this pretty good. This is going to be a good day. And I'm more able to receive and exchange information and conversation and things like that. Whereas, yeah, if I've slept badly, so I know I'm tired, I haven't been to the gym, I probably, have not had a coffee, I've not got my HRT patch on. I mean, there's no sensible reflection I'm putting in there. I'm just coming in hot.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant. So here we go. 13% always. That's impressive. 63% sometimes. That's where I was sometimes. I'd like to be always, but yeah, those people are always need to, I could do some coaching rarely. And no one's never. That's interesting. But I suppose the group of people listening to this was slightly self-selecting, because people that think emotions at work don't belong at work probably wouldn't have signed up for this webinar. So I suspect this poll isn't totally relative, but it's I'm impressed with what we're seeing here. Okay, right. We're now going to touch on your talk that went down so well at our conference, and thanks again, Katie.
Thank you.
How to create psychological safety and how it impacts the people around us. I know it's just a bullet point on my questions here that I've got to ask you, but yeah, just go for it, Katie, on this one. It's a massive one.
Yeah. So yeah, we've already touched really briefly on psychological safety, but again, for me, it's so foundational to having good conversations, to really being able to. Um, for anyone who's kind of done any work in coaching, we use this term called holding space, right? And it is really about creating this gap and this place where we can all just be who we are with one another and be really present. And for me, that is what the creation of psychological safety gives us. It's the ability to be present with one another and kind of suspend judgment and suspend you kind of that need to have to be right, or to have, or anything else that comes with this. And we can just be with each other, listening really carefully and understanding where we're coming at, so that we can make good decisions, or create good outcomes, or the things that are going to be, we'll come and talk about productivity, but give us the outputs that we need. And again, this is all very environment focused. And I've got a really handy little tool that I use, which is like a psychological safety scorecard. So some of the things that are listed on there is, if you want to know whether or not psychological safety is existing within your spaces, you want to be looking out for things like people asking curious questions. So we talked about curiosity. How are you delving a bit further? So if you have people in your team that when you're having discussions and someone does lean in and says, "Oh, that was really interesting, Matt. Can you tell me a bit more about that?" Brilliant. That's a big tick. It's like, okay, people are listening and wanting to know more. So that demonstration of curiosity is a really good sign that some psychological safety exists. And the same as building. I really like that point that you made, Matt, about hormones. Can I do, I've got to build on that around mood, so it's this safety of like, oh, I've taken what you've said, it's inspired something within me, I'm acknowledging that and then building. Whereas the flip to that would be, well, if psychological safety wasn't present, you'd have got halfway through what you were saying, it would have sparked something in me, and I would have gone, yeah, and I want to tell you about mood because that's the thing that I'm thinking about, and I'd have cut you off. And we know that happens too, right? We've seen that happen. So it's about making sure that we hold that space for one another, so that you get to finish and formulate your thoughts, and then I get to respond and build, rather than be like, I need to be important, put me in, coach.
Yeah, and it's funny. When you did the building, obviously I forgot that you were role playing, and then I was like, I felt heard, even though we're like, because obviously we're talking to people that can't talk to us because we're on a webinar. But oh, I know, Kate's heard my point there. So it's like, you got me a role playing. It feels good when someone actually takes what you've done and then build on it. So, but that curiosity one, I am curious about this, Katie, actually, because I can imagine people listening, they're in busy companies. It's like one where we go around and meet our customers, everyone's busy, busy, busy.
Yeah.
Curiosity takes time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you talked about creating like this space, but how do we create time for curiosity? Because again, curiosity's evolved for a reason, hasn't it? It's really powerful. But I'm just trying to sit in the companies of the people listening now, and I can imagine in meetings people trying to be curious and people like, yeah, well, we need to get on to the next action point.
Yeah. And I mean, we know that we're going to talk about biases, and we've already, like, at the start of the conversation, we talked about when we hear data we don't like, we have this negativity bias where we're going to hear the things that we don't like, and they're going to hit us the hardest. And as humans, we also have action bias, right? We are absolutely motivated towards productivity and action, and it's really easy to go, right, jump ahead. What's the solution? Especially when we talk about personality typing and psychometrics and stuff sometimes, and if you've got people who are naturally, and I am one of these people, if anyone's familiar with certain things, I lead with my red. Well, I'm a yellow, but I lead with my red energy a lot of the time. Whereas I'm like, get to the point, let's do this. Actually, you have to resist that, because think about it. What is a priority? And this is really what we want to be getting into the crux of. Yes, we want to be action focused, and you absolutely need to have actions attached to things, because otherwise it's just conversation and dreams. And let's face it, hope isn't a strategy, right? So a strategy is a strategy, and you need actions. But jumping straight to the action means you're skipping steps, which means if you really want to have the best conversations that give you the most innovative and best solutions to the thing that you're trying to overcome or the idea you're trying to create, you've got to give it time to develop. It's like, I use a baking analogy. If you're going to bake a loaf of bread, you can put all the ingredients in a bowl, mix them up, stick it in the oven, and you're going to end up with a pancake. You've got to get that bread mixed up, and then you let it prove, and then you have to knock it back and you let it prove again. It needs time to do the thing that you are asking it to do, so that you can have, lovely warm bread roll with loads of butter on it at the end of the day. Like, you're not going to get that outcome. You're going to get something pretty stodgy and gross. And if you're all right with that, fine. But really, what's your priority? Where do you want to be with it? So prioritize the space. And I know that that's what nobody wants to hear when you've got 1,000 things on your to-do list.
Yep.
But if you don't start building it in now, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So how can you find small opportunities to build in that space to get people confident with the art of engaging in a different way? Because we're all conditioned as well. We're all going to be like, oh, but we know we need to get to the end.
Yeah.
So how do you build it in to make it more of a practice that you can then expand over time and then prioritize it?
Katie, just a question or a build on that, which is, this is something I hear from HR directors a lot, which is, because psychological safety is a top 4 driver of happiness as well, just to share. And they go, well, we've read the books, we've heard Katie speak at your conference, and I'm on board. And they're trying to explain it to the CEO, but the CEO just doesn't get it. They don't think it's a priority and need space. How do you communicate that with someone that isn't getting it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because again, I am a naturally curious person, right? So for some of us, it comes really interesting. And then I think for those of us that are naturally curious, we find ourselves in jobs like coaching, where we just get to meddle about in other people's minds and ask lots of questions. And I'm immediately curious about things like that, because I'm like, well, what is it that is going on for that person that is a priority for them, that is preventing them from seeing the benefit from creating psychological safety? Because honestly, if you say to your CEO, what are your top critical priorities for this year, it's going to be things probably like sales revenue, right? It's going to be recruitment and retention. There's going to be key topics that are really kicking off right now. And okay, psychological safety forms part of the solution to this.
Yep.
So if you want to not spend additional cash having to re-recruit people, because we're trying to retain the people that we've already got, we don't want to lose them, we have to create an environment that they want to stay in.
Yeah.
If we want to make our organisation attractive for people to come and work for, it has to be the type of place where people don't have to skirt around the questions of like, yeah, but if I get pregnant, how is this organisation going to... We want to be upfront. We want them to know, actually, I can come into this workplace regardless of my previous experiences, or even because of my current experiences, I can't wait to get out of here. Your place looks amazing. I want to be there. I'm actively coming. That's what you want to be creating. If you want to talk about, well, actually, we need to put a focus on sales. Okay, well, creating psychological safety within your teams means your sales teams are going to have better conversations. They're more likely to want to share leads, to build on the work that one another are doing, to identify opportunities for more people within your team and share that. They're then more likely to have better conversations with your clients, leave a better lasting impact, which creates better sales relationships, which means you're more likely to get repeat customers. Do you not want that?
Yes, please.
Like, so, but for me, it's like, well, okay,
Yeah.
just saying, yeah, but look, read this book on psychological safety. It's going to be like, of course, yeah. I'm like, who's got time for that? But actually, what are the problems we're trying to solve? And really, I'm a big fan of root cause analysis. Okay, so what are in the root of these problems that we're trying to solve? Some of that will be psychological, some of it will be other things. But I'm gonna, I'll bet the house on like organizational culture will play a huge part, because if people are anything to do with your product or your service, it's a kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. But I think this leads us nicely on, Katie, around biases, because some people have a bias. Like I've heard leaders say, yeah, but you need to keep people on their toes. And you see it in football, the world of football, all the time, where someone has a contract and they talk about, as soon as they get their contract, they won't try very hard and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of unlearning and biases as well, where people they haven't done the work themselves to understand that psychological safe workforces result in creativity, productivity. They're coming from perhaps a mindset where their manager taught them that maybe 20 years ago. But that's because we talk about that a lot, like stuff that you got to unlearn that you heard, and it may have been true in the past or may not, but that for me, that's an example of something I hear out there. It's people go, yeah, we got to keep people on their toes. But I'm guessing that's probably not come from anywhere. It's just an assumption that someone has been taught about leadership.
Right. So I think it does come from somewhere, and putting it out there, just my opinion, and I'm basically.
Well, I've got you on here, Katie.
Yep. If anyone thinks otherwise or has evidence to the contrary, again, I am absolutely up for a conversation about this, because this is the sort of stuff that gets my brain firing. But I think, essentially our system of business and economy is a capitalist system, right? So it is essentially, it's an exploitative system where we want people to work to produce things for money. And historically, it would have all been about getting the most output out of those people. So when, if I am on a production line producing something, it's my line leader, my CEO essentially wants me to go as fast as possible to do as much. So I can understand the keep people on their toes. It's a case, because if you don't work harder, the next person in the queue is ready to take your spot. So you've got to keep going, go, go, go. And that worked through this kind of, production system. But also we had people that were literally very unwell, like it was not a healthy work environment. It was exploitative and it was dangerous, right? And we know better now. And when we think about through the kind of the 1900s, and all these leadership management books and things have come out, and it's all like, and a lot of the leadership models we refer to now are like from the 60s and 70s, and we just think, yeah, that was great for the time with the knowledge and we had at the time. That has moved on now. So leadership models, management models are different. Organizational models are different. The way that we work is different. AI doesn't want us standing on a production line, right? It's all different. So we have to learn to run our companies in a different way.
Yeah.
And that involves having people that are highly engaged, that are looking out for our business, that are paying attention and are tuned in and want to be part of our workforce.
Yeah.
Because we want meaning and purpose in work.
Yeah.
We want to be paid fairly, but we want meaning and purpose. We want to show up because options are out there. So kind of, yeah, they keep people on their toes. And even the idea about football players, right? But once they're signed, they're not going to work very hard. I don't know anybody who operates at a professional sports level, and I do actually know people who operate at professional sports levels. They want to win.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when they are out there, they are going all out.
Yeah.
So I don't think it hinges on a contract. I think it hinges on that's the type of person that is going to win for you. And when you create an environment where they want to win for you, not just for themselves because they want to win, but because they want you to win, because you're their team, you're their boss, you're their co-worker, that is when you get the kind of psychologically safe environment that no one's messing. Like your team is good.
Totally. I mean, the happiness index works with sports teams for years, and it started out in cricket and spread into football and everything. But we work with UK Sport, and they're leading the Olympians, and it's not about the contract every 4 years. It's about that gold medal and they need to be enabled, and that's why you have conversations around like, have they got the kit, have they got the money, and all that kind of stuff, which underlies it. but they're not doing it because of contract length. They're doing it because this is a moment in time where I can achieve this thing.
Yeah. No one dedicates their entire life to a specific thing to be then looking about going, oh yeah, but like, yeah, have I got the right signing bonus? It's like, no, they want that. Let's be clear. We want to get paid, and we should be paying people for doing good work. But we do it because we want to do the outcome. Like,
yeah, and I build on a couple of things you were saying as well around the factory and the examples. The happiness index still work with customers that have people on production lines, right? But I think what has changed in the world as well is technology. And the example that I always use, I've just been working with a customer that's at hotels, is before that person may work in that town and there may be only one 5-star hotel in that town. So they've got very limited choice on where they work. So all these things that people now talk around, like purpose, they've always been there, but it's like a hierarchy of needs, which is if there's only one hotel that will pay you in your town, you'll work there. But we now have these crazy things called WhatsApp and LinkedIn and Facebook, where if you're fired tomorrow or you're treated badly, you can set up a WhatsApp group with 5 or 6 people and start a business. If you were 4 or 5 lawyers working in a firm that you didn't like, you could start tomorrow. You could go on LinkedIn and find the CEO of the 5-star hotel that's 2 towns away. Like, it used to be really difficult to do that. So the power dynamic has changed. Yeah. And some companies are struggling to switch round, and then they blame it on things like Gen Z. So they just, another bias comes out. Oh yeah, youngsters don't want to work anymore. It's like,
it's those lazy kids.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, we're just going to go to the next.
But just before you move on, sorry, just before you, because there's one other thing you said about, and I want to just also echo that I spent many years also working in an environment where we did pharmaceutical manufacturing, and again, I know full well that the people working on those lines, even though they were working on a production line, they were tuned in, they were paying attention, and we used to operate like on a right first time basis. And if you want people to be paying the kind of attention that means that you get things right first time, which means you minimize your errors and your product goes out and doesn't miss deadlines, you need people who are engaged in your business rather than going, bloody hell, I can't wait till payday. Like, I mean, they might be thinking that anywhere, but also you want them to be paying attention to their role. And that you need the environment where they care and are invested rather than feeling like they're being used.
100%. Like it's kind of lost in all the happiness research because a lot of it's focused on productivity and financial performance. But if you're unhappy, you're less accurate in your task, which sometimes people sort of like, they can't get their head around it. But think about it in your personal life. If you're doing something that doesn't make you happy, or you're in a relationship that doesn't make you happy, you're not going about it.
You're not invested.
No. And I think the biggest study in this, which is quite scary, the biggest study is by Professor Jeremy Dawson from Sheffield University, which is the NHS. So they studied 1 million employees in the NHS, and I'll boil down his research. You can listen to his research on the Happiness Index podcast if anyone wants to go and scroll down to that one. But he found that if you took 2 hospitals exactly the same, the one with the unhappier employees has a higher death rate. And I don't think that is because you have people consciously being incompetent. I think in all organizations, you do have incompetent people that you have to deal with for various different reasons. But the majority of people are not. So it's a subconscious thing. If they're not happy, they're not as accurate in their tasks. But when you're in the NHS, when we use the example of a production line or a law firm, if you're in the NHS and you apply that across all the operations and all the care that is needed for individuals, that impacts patient outcomes, which is really serious stuff.
Absolutely. And the same for psychological safety. Amy Edmondson's psychological safety research, I think, began in surgical outcomes and in surgical spaces where nurses were free to speak up and challenge. Unsurprisingly, surgical error rates went down.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if I'm having somebody, cut into parts of my body, I would really like that to be a successful outcome. So yes, please, to psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never heard anyone describe it that way, but I'm never going to forget it. It's a powerful way of remembering it. So we're going to go to the second poll today, Katie. David's going to bring that one up. I'll just read it out. How safe do your employees feel to express their thoughts, ideas, or concerns at work? My first thought on this is to happen. We do a survey on this in our cultural assessment, so I'd like to bring up my data to answer this one.
You're like, I can prove it.
Yeah.
And that's why tools like your survey are so important, in my opinion, because I know coming into this, we had a conversation about this question, because my thought on this is, well, how safe do your employees feel? How can you answer that on behalf of your employees? Your employees,
I need to ask them.
yeah. So for me, it's like you need to be able to back it up exactly as you've just said, which is I can answer this question because my people have told me.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
And now
But don't let that sway anybody else. Obviously, we want your opinion.
No, but it is right. But I also find it fascinating to ask people what they think a score is going to be versus what it actually is, because you're creating a bit of a gap analysis. Because if you're speaking to a CEO and they're like, everyone feels safe, and then you get the data back and it says they're unsafe, it's actually better to have a scenario where CEO's saying, yeah, I feel like people are unsafe, and the data comes back, because there's a reality that you can work from. Oh, I think we're going to get the results in here, Katie. And they're going to pop up. Okay. Very safe. Quite. That's interesting. No one's gone not particularly safe.
We've got some unsafe, though, which I think is honest, and I applaud that.
Yeah, I think it's also the word, again, as we know, the power of wording, not particularly safe. I think it could also be a confusing phrase. But I think that's interesting. I think every company, I think anyone who's fully emotionally aware, if that's at 100%, I don't think any company in the world could say my employees 100%, because I think you're always aware of issues and stuff that may come up, and things change in time. But I like the wording on that. The fact that there's 15% here feel their employees say very safe. And whilst we're on the subject, a top tip for anyone that's going for a job interview, when I'm advising my friends, I always say to ask, like, what is the culture like? And then when they describe it, say, oh, can you share some evidence on that with me? Because that's one of those little questions that I think does go into safety, because if you are doing the work on this, you will have, for example, a top line report that you can share. You're obviously not going to share the company's private HR data, but there should be a piece of internal comms that says, right, these are the 5 things that we do really well here, and these are the 5 things that we're working on. That if I was going for an interview somewhere and I asked that question and they sent me that, I would definitely be more chance that I'd go and work there, because I'd be like, okay, they've answered this honestly. They haven't just said it's amazing.
Yeah.
They've given me something.
Yeah, and as a build on that, what I've always so in my work, one of the things I find really interesting is, so a lot of my work comes through referrals, because nobody really wants to kind of go, yeah, do you know, our organisation, we were quite racist, and then we worked with Katie, and now we're a lot better. But no one's really looking to put that PR out there. But I'm actually of the opinion you should put information like that out there, because if you can demonstrate this is where we were, here is what we have done and what we continue to do, and this is where we are going to be. It states not only awareness of your own organizational culture, but your willingness and intention to do something about that. And I think that level of transparency and honesty, while really uncomfortable and scary, is something that a lot of people will respect and get on board with, because it's real, isn't it? And we're all humans. We all know perfection is just not a thing. It doesn't exist. And when you can see someone literally saying, like, yeah, we know our dirty laundry and we're addressing it, like, and it also gives me the sense that, okay, well, if I join and something isn't happening in line with what you're telling me, I can probably tell you, because you've massively owned that.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's huge.
Yeah, I did that on a school tour for my children recently. I wrote down the 6 things the CEO said, and then when we went on the tour, I said to the children, which ones of those do you believe to be true and which ones do you believe not? And it was so consistent. The 2 that people believe not to be true, every student picked them out. So it gave me a bit of an insight of like, what's the chief head telling me here versus what are the people who are actually experiencing telling me. And it was consistent. The 2 that they weren't getting right came out across from random students that I was meeting.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 questions in about 8 minutes. We've already touched on this one, but we never even got into it, because we went on a segue, which I thought might happen, Katie, which is how to identify confirmation bias, and how can we use data to rethink how we lead and connect. So 4 minutes on that one we've got.
Okay, well, we can do it quickly. It's back to your original point around you've got to do the investigative work, right? So confirmation bias exists when this is what our brains are massively fantastic at doing. We process millions and millions of bits of information. So we've got natural filters, and our brain is always scanning everything that we're doing to say, like, is this useful? Is this going to kill us? What can we get rid of? So when it sees things that fit the narrative we already had, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And you go. So that's just how we work. So you actively have to go looking to test the things that you believe so that A, you know that they're true, or B, you can do something about it when you get alternate evidence. So again, it comes back to ask difficult questions, be curious. Are you really listening to the answers? Are you questioning your motivation for why are you asking the questions that you're asking? Is it because you are trying to lead people to tell you things you already know, or are you asking because you want the truth? And you can figure that out. I mean, you will be the expert on how to ask questions and how to word questions. There are ways of doing that to make sure you're not telling people like, yeah, this is the box we want you to tick. If you want the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think when you were talking, whenever I hear that phrase, I always think about A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicklaus. That whole movie is essentially about that. Like, how much do you actually want the truth?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've managed to squeeze a movie tip into this as well.
Absolutely, which is great. No Jurassic Park. Yeah. And actually, just one other thing, because when it comes to the way that which you ask questions as well, and it's also the questions we don't ask. The things that we think we might know to be true, but we're not going to ask because we don't want to have the nastiness confirmed to us. So I think there's also look at what you are asking, but also what you're not asking, because let's be clear, that's manipulation. Okay, that is you manipulating the outcome of the data that you're getting back from your people. So
Yeah, it's funny when I'm not a coach like you, Katie, but I do mentoring for other entrepreneurs, and I just helping them really, a couple of entrepreneurs. And we always do this bit at the beginning, because this is what we do when we meet as founders of Happiness Index. We go through our happiness ourselves. We just talk out. And the question I always ask is, say, since we last met, is there anything unsaid that you didn't feel that you could say to each other? And I always like cringe saying it, because I know it's like really uncomfortable. And if it is really uncomfortable, it's probably not going to come out. But every now and then, one or two little things come out, like the unsaids. And you get onto like a little thing, because often I loved your point, like the unsaids. That's often where the real fault lines and the real issues that you need to dig into exist.
Yeah, there's nothing more powerful, I think, than the question, tell me more.
Yeah. So we touched on the final question quite a bit, and I want you to tell me more on this, Katie. Which how emotions impact productivity.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we have gone over this one, but just from a productivity perspective, it depends on how you're measuring productivity, if it's simply kind of outputs and widgets produced, or if it's around how innovative the conversations are, or the success rate of outcomes and projects. Like, so firstly, what does productivity mean to you? How are you measuring it? Because that's something that you really need to be clear on. But let's face it, our emotions, whichever outcome that's going to be, definitely play a role, because the way that we experience the world and the things that triggers within us changes the dynamic of how we interact with each other, how we interact with equipment, how we interact with processes. So, for example, if you're rolling out a new process for producing widgets, and I haven't been fully informed with it, I haven't been part of the change management process, I'm just being told, oh, we do it this way now, get on with it.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be, especially if you're me, probably going to be a little bit defensive about that, probably not going to engage in the way that you want me to. So we know that that's already, my emotions and my feeling about what's happening is going to be a barrier to your productivity.
Yep.
So it can work that way. And then likewise, the opposite is true. When you have got this culture of psychological safety where people can be curious, people can be vulnerable, and I'm not constantly having my brain and my amygdala spark off going like, is this going to kill me? Could I lose my job? Do I need to have a difficult conversation? I'm more likely to engage. I'm more likely to say, oh, I know actually we've had this idea about this product. Have we thought about, is it is it NASA when they have like certain panels or something, and the chain of people didn't report the panel that they were like, oh, did that work or not?
Yeah.
Rocket explodes. Spoiler alert. Yeah. So it's kind of like those moments are the things you want people just going, oh, is that right? Should we just check that? Because that will save you the time and energy down the line. And again, you know, back to relationships. If I get on pretty well with my team and I care about them, more likely to do a better job than if I come into work every day thinking, oh, this bunch of pillocks, I just can't handle it. Don't want to be here. Hate it. You know, it just impacts everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just don't think Pillix is used enough these days. Right.
I had to be careful. My brain before I got to that, I was just like, pick a word, not the one that's in your head.
I feel like that's going to be your next book, all about the Pillix.
This bunch of pillocks.
Yeah. That's interesting. As you were talking again, I was imagining this landscape, this scrolling landscape of, instead of people looking out at the landscape and offering their perspective, they're looking behind themselves because they're not feeling safe. They're looking for the danger, or they're looking for another job in our non-cave person environment that we live in. So, oh, Katie, we're out of time. We're out of time.
You were going to say something about Fern Cotton.
Fern Cotton said something I found super interesting about your intro, Katie. She said, bear in mind her job is to talk. She said she has a voice in her. And to me, she strikes me as someone who's probably got the least controversial views that you can imagine. But she said at the CIPD conference, I have a voice in my head that thinks I'm going to get cancelled every time I talk. Because we talk in meetings, generally. She's talking broadcasting. And I just then, I linked what you said about psychological safety and confidence, because I think if we're both up for it, we should probably do a follow-up on confidence, because that's what I was going to say. You've got 30 seconds to respond to that. Anything to add to that point? Is that something you've heard before, like that Fern said?
Yeah, 100%. Every single leader that I work with as a coach, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to offend people. I don't want to get cancelled. Like, that's literally my job. So yes, we should definitely do a session on that, because there is something we hold on to about this concept of being a good or a bad person, and everything we live in the world is just so black and white, and it's not true. And we need to embrace the imperfection and learn to be in that space where it's okay to make mistakes. Being cancelled is not a thing. I'm happy to talk about that more, and embrace who we are.
Yeah, I think we've got a webinar title, Being Cancelled is Not a Thing. And 3 points to finish on. I'm not going to summarize what Katie said, because you can go and listen. You can listen back. This will be on the happiness-index.com website. So go and listen back to what Katie said. But both got 30 seconds each. In 30 seconds, Katie, people that are listening and going, wow, I'd like to work with Katie. Tell us, everyone's always focused on the why. Tell us what you actually do. So if someone can come and spend some money with Katie, how do they do it?
Yep. So you can come and work with me if you want to get over the fear of putting your foot in it, essentially. If you want to get confidence to have those difficult conversations on all of the topics we've talked about and more, that is exactly what I do. Essentially, I talk with people, not at them, to help them to understand the tricky topics of DEI.
Lovely.
And you can find me on LinkedIn and on my website.
So go and connect with Katie. If you're interested in the Happiness Index, essentially we find out how your people think and feel. That is a survey platform. But not only do we do that, we then get into the data, action plans, training, consultancy to help you fix all of the stuff that you undoubtedly find. So if you find bad stuff in your data, don't worry, everyone does. So that's it. My last and final thing today is say thank you to our attendees. Thank you to David, who's been behind the scenes, sorting out the polls and everything. And most importantly, thank you, Katie, for your amazing insight.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.